He's been a pop culture horror icon for decades, ever since his introduction in EC's Crime Patrol issue 15, before it officially changed to its now infamous title, Tales from the Crypt. That's right, we're talking about the sarcastic, wisecracking narrator, the Crypt Keeper. But where did this seemingly immortal undead archivist of the macabre come from? Of all the stories he has told, his story is the one fans ask about most often. Well, comic book and horror fans, there is an answer to that question, and it resides in Tales from the Crypt, Volume 1, Issue 33, from December 1952, in the story called Lower Birth. And I have to tell you, this one gets a little weird. But before we begin, we'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe, comment, and share this video out. It really helps out the channel each and every week. Thank you. Now, let's get into it. Our opening panel features the Crypt Keeper himself, not often seen in such detail, but this story is different, as he invites us to enter the crypt for another tale of horror. We begin in the Ozark Mountains, well before television, radio, or even movies existed. The only form of entertainment, the traveling circus act, often including the grotesque and shocking collection of the sideshow oddities, the bearded lady, the strong man, the lizard boy, and the carnival barker enticing you to pay up and enter a tent to view the strangest that Mother Nature has to offer. But this collection was special. Ernest Freely, the sideshow owner, had something others did not, something special. And the people of the Ozarks were about to meet Dr. Zachary Kling, a retired archaeologist who had discovered Myrna, an Egyptian mummy, and now gets paid a handsome salary by Ernest to display her prominently for all to see. 5 times a day, Dr. Kling would tell his tale, how he and his expedition found Myrna in the Valley of the Kings, in the cliffs overlooking the Nile River, the only female mummy in existence in North America. He would even undo some of her wrappings and show her face to the crowds whose mouths would be agape at the sight. The inscriptions in her tomb told Myrna's tale. She was a lady-in-waiting for the pharaoh's wife, ever faithful to her, waiting on her every need. But Myrna was also very beautiful, and one day, the pharaoh decided that he wanted Myrna for himself and tried to force himself upon her. But, like we said, Myrna was loyal to the pharaoh's wife and refused his advances. This angered the Egyptian king very much, and for her rejection, Myrna was punished. The pharaoh had her wrapped in ceremonial windings and buried alive. For 4,000 years, Myrna lay in her sarcophagus, suffering a terrible death and a tragic fate. That is, until Dr. Kling found her. And now, as he pulls back the curtain to expose her to the shocked crowds, we see Myrna in her sarcophagus, arms crossed across her chest. And if that wasn't enough to thrill the throngs of onlookers, it paled in comparison to when Dr. Kling unwrapped Myrna's face, revealing her dried skin hanging from her skull like wet tissue paper. Her eyes receded into their sockets, her lips curled back, offering a toothy grin. Some could not believe what they saw, others had to look away. However, every night, more and more came to witness this spectacle. The curious, the skeptical, all came. Word traveled fast in the small communities of rural America. And after the show one night, as Mr. Freely sat at his desk in the wagon car, a man entered, Jeb Sickles, and asked to speak with Freely. Sickles wanted to know if Mr. Freely was interested in acquiring another item of interest for his menagerie of freaks and oddities. Sickles explains that he is considered the doctor around those parts, even though he did not have a license to practice medicine. The folks around that part of the Ozarks liked what he did for them. Mr. Freely, a man with little patience, demanded that Sickles get to the point, but Sickles told him to take it easy. The story was important. About 2 years ago, an old crone living above the snow line had come down the mountains. No one had ever laid eyes on her before, but she begged Sickles to come back with her, begged him so bad that he could not say no. She said that her son was sick, terribly sick, and that he was dying. And when she brought Sickles up to her cave, he himself nearly vomited at what he saw. Now Mr. Freely's attention was captured. He needed to know what Sickles witnessed. Sickles told him it was the old crone's son, Enoch. It was horrible. He had 2 heads, and he was an hour away from dying. Although the old crone begged for a miracle, Sickles could not deliver one. Enoch was on death's door. Stricken with grief, the old crone asked that Sickles take him away, out of her sight. Sickles did as she asked, And poor Enoch, he couldn't have been more than 22 years old. And knowing how the people of the Ozarks would react, Sickles kept the body hidden, preserved in an old moonshine still. The only question Mr. Freely had now: did Sickles still have the corpse? The answer was yes. For 2 years, submerged in alcohol, Freely became desperate. This could really drive up business. He grabbed Sickles and demanded to be taken to the corpse at once. They left by horse-drawn wagon immediately to the hidden still. The light from Freely's lantern illuminated the huge wooden vat, and from below the surface, the pulpy white faces of the two-headed corpse of Enoch stared up at the duo. There was nothing more to ponder. On the spot, Freely offered Sickles a job. Join up with the show, get a good salary exhibiting Enoch to the masses, tell the same story he told him earlier. Sickles reluctantly agreed. Enoch's body was placed in a specially made glass tank filled with formaldehyde. Each night, Sickles would relate his tale of Enoch dying in his arms in a remote cave. And then, Sickles would pull back the curtain, announcing, "Behold, Enoch, the two-headed man." The typical reaction from the crowds ranged from gasping to choking to gagging and revulsion. It did not take long for Freely to understand that Enoch was as popular a draw as Myrna the Mummy, and moved the two together as top-billing attractions. For Sickles, that was good news. For Dr. Kling, Myrna's keeper, it was unwelcome. But Enoch and Myrna were placed opposite each other, and 5 times a day, Jeb and Dr. Kling exhibited their oddities to the curious who would part with their quarters to get a view. 5 times a day, Myrna would be unwrapped. 5 times a day, Enoch would be revealed. And 5 times a day, Enoch, floating in formaldehyde, would stare with glazed eyes at the putrid, mummified, unwrapped face of Myrna. And as the carnival moved from town to town, and as bigger and bigger crowds gathered, soon tensions rose between Dr. Kling and Jeb Sickles. Enoch had become a bigger draw than Myrna. Freely made the decision to lower Dr. Kling's pay and raise Sickles to make them even. Then, Freely, the consummate businessman, made the decision to move Myrna out front. Enoch had become more popular than the mummy, and this was Freely's way of drawing more admissions. Enoch was the main attraction. Now, when Myrna's wrappings were removed from her face, she stared out across the crowds and saw nothing. And when the curtain was pulled back, uncovering Enoch, he too stared across the crowds and saw nothing. Thus, in the black of night, when the carnival folk lay asleep, Myrna's dried and bony hands slowly and quietly pulled away her own wrappings, while the bloated, pale hands of Enoch reached up to the rim of the tank and pulled its mushy, formaldehyde-soaked body over the top. And when morning came, the sideshow tent was filled with anger and accusation. Sickles accused Kling of stealing Enoch. Kling accused Sickles of removing Myrna. Freely ordered the two to calm down. He explained that if both were missing, that neither could have been the culprit. Dr. Kling knelt down, examining the remains of mummy wrappings and formaldehyde drippings leading out of the tent. The 3 men followed the trail like breadcrumbs down the road and into town. It led them to a house, with a sign outside advertising the resident as the local justice of the peace. The 3 were horrified at the possibilities. They knocked, and the justice answered. He was a friendly man. He told the 3 visitors that a couple did come by last night and wanted to get married. So yep, he performed the ceremony. Freely asked the justice if there was anything strange about the couple. Shucks, the justice answered. All he could say was that the 2 must have been drinking. They both smelled terrible. But $5 is $5. Freely demanded of the justice, "Didn't you see?" But the justice told him, "Didn't see nothing. I can't see. I'm blind." The only response the 3 men could muster was, "Good Lord." The Crypt Keeper then appears and tells us that the 3 men lost the trail after that. In fact, it wasn't until a year later, when the carnival returned to the very Ozark town where Enoch first joined the sideshow, that Mr. Freely heard about the strange occurrences up in the mountains. A resident of the town told Mr. Freely that he didn't believe the stories being passed about. Who would? A living mummy and a 2-headed corpse running around the Ozarks? Freely believed. He asked, where? Where did the townsfolk see them? The answer? Up in the old crone's cave. She's dead, but the folks around here are mighty superstitious. Freely, knowing that Jeb could take him and Dr. Kling to the cave because he knew the location, called upon both men, and the 3 of them went, and what they saw, they did not expect. Myrna and Enoch lying still in the cave. Both Dr. Kling and Jeff were incredibly relieved, so relieved that they themselves dragged the oddities back down the mountain. For Freely, after over a year, he had his moneymakers returned to him. But what they did not see, or hear, or even realize, is that there was a third person in that cave that day. The three men were out of earshot when the wail of a child drifted out from deep inside. They never saw the infant thing crawl out into the sunlight, tears running down its cheeks, crying out for its parents. For the Crypt Keeper, that is where he ends his tale. The tale of his father, Enoch, the two-headed corpse, and his mother, Myrna, the 4,000-year-old mummy. His only request of you? He understands that there's a carnival today, 80 years later, that still exhibits a two-headed preserved corpse and a mummy. If you see them, write to him. He can't wait to send his parents a card. After all, it's their anniversary next month. Thus ends the origin story of the Crypt Keeper, everyone's favorite horror storyteller. I told you, it was gonna get a little weird. I hope you enjoyed this look back into pop culture history, and if you want more comic book fun right away, click on the thumbnail at the end of the video for our look back at the origin story and first ever appearance of Anarchy, the Batman's most socially and politically divisive foe. You'll be glad you did. I thank you for watching. Until next time, remember I'm still your reluctant gringo, somewhere south of the border. Salud, and a huevo.